Welcome back to Midlife Awakening, the space where we wrestle with truth, purpose, and the call of God in the middle of our everyday lives. I'm Z, and today we're talking about something that can completely shift how you face your next battle: faith that moves. Let me ask you this: have you ever felt stuck between believing and doing? You know that God is able, you've seen Him work before, but somehow you've stopped moving. You're waiting for clarity, for a sign, for someone else to step first, and in the waiting, your faith has gone quiet. That's where we meet two men in Scripture, both facing the same impossible situation, but with very different responses: Saul and Jonathan. Israel is under attack by the Philistines. The army is small, outnumbered, afraid. Saul, the king, sits under a pomegranate tree, surrounded by 600 men, a priest, and a lot of fear. He's the one everyone looks to for courage, but he's doing nothing. But then there's Jonathan, his son. Jonathan looks at a young armor bearer and says something crazy. Something that sounds like faith on fire. Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. You can almost hear the difference between Saul and Jonathan in that one verse. Saul says nothing. He just waits. Jonathan moves. This is where faith gets real, because Saul represents the kind of faith that waits for conditions to be perfect. The faith that says, I'll obey once I have confirmation. I'll take the next step when I feel peace. I'll move when it makes sense. But Jonathan, he moves in faith before he sees anything change. He's not reckless, but he refuses to be paralyzed by fear. He says, perhaps the Lord will act. That word alone separates the faith that moves from the faith that watches. Jonathan's faith didn't demand certainty. It trusted God's character. And isn't that where we get stuck? In midlife, we've seen enough disappointment to be cautious. We've prayed prayers that didn't turn out the way we expected. So we start building altars to safety instead of faith. We stay under our own pomegranate trees, comfortable, careful, calling it wisdom. But sometimes what we call wisdom is really just fear wearing a spiritual mask. Then later, Jonathan climbs up that hill, literally climbing toward danger, while Saul sits in the shade. Jonathan doesn't know the outcome. He doesn't know if the Philistines will crush them. He just knows God can. And that's what real faith sounds like. God can. Not I can. Not if only everything lines up, but God can. Faith that moves says, even if I don't know how this will end, I'm stepping forward because God is faithful. It's when you apply for that job you thought you're unqualified for, because you believe your purpose isn't finished yet. It's when you forgive that person who hurt you, because you believe God's healing runs deeper than bitterness. It's when you step out of comfort because obedience is better than security. Faith isn't about feeling fearless, it's about moving even when you're shaking. But let's be honest, there's a little soul in all of us. The part that hesitates, the part that wants control, the part that says, maybe later, Lord. Saul started out with a promise, but fear became his default setting. He wanted approval. He wanted certainty. He wanted religion without risk. And maybe that's you today. You love God, but you've stopped believing He can still move through you. You're scrolling through other people's miracles while you're sitting under your tree, waiting for something to happen. But faith that moves isn't waiting for comfort. It creates movement by trusting God. Faith says, if I stay here, I'll die in the waiting. But if I move, God might just show up. When Jonathan and his armor bearer climbed that hill, God caused confusion in the enemy's camp. Two men, just two, started a ripple that shook an entire army. Faith doesn't need numbers, it just needs obedience. The moment Jonathan moved, God moved. Maybe you've been asking God to show up in your situation, but He's waiting for you to climb, to step forward, to trust that He can do more with your little faith than you can do with all your fear. You see, the difference between Saul and Jonathan wasn't position, it was posture. Saul was king, but Jonathan had courage. Saul had a crown, but Jonathan had conviction. And that's what God still honors, the kind of faith that moves. So what about you? Where are you sitting when God's calling you to climb? What's the hill He's asking you to take? The step you've been delaying because it feels too uncertain? Faith that moves doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It makes the moment perfect by stepping into it. Jonathan's words echo through time for us today. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Nothing. Not your age, not your mistakes, not your lack of resources or connections. If God is in it, He can move through one obedient heart, yours. Maybe this week it's time to move again, to climb again, to believe again. Because faith that moves isn't just about winning battles. It's about awakening the kind of trust that says, God, even if it's just me and my armor bearer, I'll go because you can. This is your reminder. Don't stay under the tree when the hill is calling. Faith that moves will always see the hand of God move in return. Thanks for joining me today on Midlife Awakening. If this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who's been sitting too long under their tree. And remember, you don't need perfect faith. You just need faith on the perfect, unshakable, faithful God.